Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of The New Standard. And as always, I am joined by my partner in crime to my left, Neil Coulong. What's up, Neil?
Lance, it's a great day. It's a great day to talk Steelers football. I'm excited to be here with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Before we jump into the show, I want to give a big shout out to my wife, Linda Williams. We are celebrating 22 years of blissful matrimony. We are celebrating this weekend. So thank you guys. Thank you guys. I got a little bit of credit hours underneath me. 22 years of credit hours. It's been a fantastic ride. So I want to give a big shout out to my wife. Also, want to give a big shout out to Plant Based Planet, my boy Superstar Kwamala TV, doing a fantastic job pushing vegan food. Also, if you guys want to join the channel, go to YouTube, do a search for The New Standard. Please like and subscribe to the show. It really helps, definitely getting us monetized and with the algorithm. Also, if you want to join the podcast and listen to it in your car as you drive, go to a popular podcast feed or do a search for Steelers and The New Standard. We got a lot of stuff we want to jump into. So I'm going to just jump right to Neil. And Neil, break down the news and notes and talk to something we talked to right before we started about the significance of the injury of Sam Darnold and how that just might impact the whole situation with Mason Rudolph.
High ankle sprain. They are not sure how long he's going to be out. I'm not sure how much I cut out there, but Sam Darnold, Panthers quarterback, injured in the team's game the other night. And they are not sure right now exactly how long he'll be out. Looks like a couple weeks at least. What we've been saying, Lance, from the beginning of all this is any kind of trade market for Steelers quarterback Mason Rudolph is going to depend on injury situations to quarterbacks across the league throughout training camp and the preseason. And a big one might have fallen. Here's the reason why. Baker Mayfield, acquired by the Panthers back this offseason, was brought in along with Sam Darnold to compete for their starting job. Mayfield had already won the starting job, and last night's game was irrelevant for the Panthers as far as their quarterback competition goes. They don't have a backup with significant experience. PJ Walker, you might remember him, XFL fame from 2 years ago, I believe it was, is still there. Is he enough to say he's a backup quarterback? Is Darnold going to be out long enough to suggest they need to bring in somebody else? The first one they'll probably look at would be Mason Rudolph. Some of that might be due to the fact that former Steelers minority owner David Tepper now owns the Carolina Panthers and is familiar with Mason Rudolph and the game that he has. His ability, his salary is one the Panthers can fit in under the cap. Question is whether or not they want to give up assets for him. I would pose a second question to that. Do the Steelers want whatever assets that would be... What assets would the Steelers need in exchange for the Panthers to overcome the perhaps temporary need that they have at the quarterback position? That I think is kind of going to be the fulcrum question of the whole situation. I'm not entirely sure it's worth the Panthers' time.
Let's do this real quick. I'm Carolina. You're the Steelers. We'll give you a 7th round pick for Mason Rudolph.
You asking me? Probably. Yes. I don't know. Probably not. Here's the thing. If I've come this far, if I'm the Steelers, if I come this far, having the 3 quarterbacks that I have, all 3 of whom, let's be honest, they've done pretty well from what we've seen, for what we can measure. They've done pretty well. I'm not against any of the 3 of them in relation to each other on my roster. The 7th round draft pick does absolutely nothing for me right now. It does little more than that later on, considering, not ironically, Steelers just cut their 7th round quarterback in the first round of cuts.
Yes.
So what does that do for me? If I'm already committed to spend $3 million in salary this season for Mason Rudolph, what does the 7th round draft pick do for me? That's worthwhile.
How about a 5th rounder?
5th round I would do, except there's the Steelers curse. You know how the Steelers treat 5th round draft picks as if they're some type of voodoo curse. We know that because they literally trade their 5th round pick as soon as they get it most years. They trade it for players who basically don't need to be on their team at all. Extreme depth, very low end players. They don't like 5th-round draft picks. That's a topic for a whole other show. I can give you some possibilities of why that might be. I do think that has some value to them in terms of a trade asset for something they might need during the season. That's happened before. That's when they've used their 5th-round pick. Avery Williamson, Nick Vannett, these are players that they acquired and then buried on their own depth charts after acquiring them in season for a 5th-round draft pick. Seems like that's what they want to use those picks for. So they don't have it now. I believe they traded it already. I don't remember for who. Maybe somebody can help me out. But if they could get that back and they had the ability to deal that for something else, I could see them wanting to do that. Otherwise, I don't think you do. I think you just keep him. You're already in the spot. I think Rudolph has done pretty well. You need a bit more than a 7th, but as you know, Lance, Nick Mullins went from Las Vegas to the Vikings for a conditional 7th-round draft pick. Nick Mullins is not really dissimilar from Mason Rudolph, so I don't think he has a market high enough for a 5th. I don't see where that's going to come from.
I think it'd be interesting if the trade happens because typically the Steelers, as we both know, they carry 3 quarterbacks. And I think, and we're going to break into our discussion about Kenny Pickett. I think Kenny Pickett is clearly the number 2 going into the season. I think Trubisky is still going to start. We'll talk about that, though. You need 3 quarterbacks. I mean, there is some value there because you would have a very inexperienced player as your number 2. Not sure the Steelers would object if the Kenny Pickett experience started early or not, a little bit early due to injury or whatever. I don't think they would be opposed to that. But I do like the idea of having 3, and I do like the idea of having a experienced 2/3 in Mason Rudolph. But put a percentage on this deal in this conversation with Carolina. What's your thoughts? Do you think it's going to happen? And by the way, I saw a very interesting interview. I don't know what David Tepper looks like. And I was watching an interview with Steve Smith and the owner of Carolina, and he was talking. I was like, this guy's from Pittsburgh. I was like, who is this guy? I was like, this guy's from Pittsburgh. And then it's it's David Tepper. I was like, and I think Tepper's the name of Carnegie Mellon's business school. I think it's the Tepper School of Business.
Not a coincidence.
My alma mater.
He basically bought that. Yeah.
Essentially, yes. So what's your odds on if you think this will happen?
I would not say it's very high. I think both teams would take a look just because it's due diligence. I think they might talk, but again, I think the market is set as a conditional 7th-round pick, and I just don't think the Steelers get anything from that they would want. They're not going to cut him. They don't need to cut him. They've needed a backup quarterback each of the last 3 seasons in which the season hung in the balance without one. Plus, here's the thing that I think we really need to look at, Lance. There's a difference between your in-game dressed backup quarterback and your next week's starter in the event of injury. Those are not necessarily the same things. Kenny Pickett has looked fantastic in the role that they've given him to play right now. I think against Jacksonville, he showed something. I don't think the first game was really much of there wasn't really anything spectacular. He wasn't asked to do a whole lot. Against Jacksonville, he definitely was. And they put him into that situation for that reason to see if he had it. And he did. He did a great job. You're very excited about his progress. If you're keeping 3 quarterbacks in week 1, and as we both agree, Trubisky's your starter, your backup needs to be the guy that can come in off the bench and replace the starter in the event of injury or other horrible things that might happen. And they also need to be reading what the defense is doing, communicating with the quarterback's coach and the offensive line coach, huddling up with the starter to go over everything. You need an experienced guy to do that. And right now, that's not Kenny Pickett. I think if you're keeping Rudolph, he's the guy that's going to dress for you, unless you're going to dress 3. I don't think they're going to dress all 3 of them. There's not really much of a point in doing that. So if that role is something that Mike Tomlin feels Kenny Pickett can do, or God help us, Mitch Trubisky doesn't need that, I would imagine they would want Rudolph to fill that role. If that's the case, though, let's say, not wishing for this, let's say Mitch Trubisky gets injured in week 1. Rudolph comes in and takes over. Does Rudolph have to start in week 2? I don't think so.
No.
I don't think there's any
That's
reason for that. Why can't they compete for it? That's why
that
you'd keep 3. And I think that's a plausible scenario. I don't see that necessarily as never being something that could happen. So if you're going to keep all 3 of them, which we suggest could be the case, considering they cut 7th round rookie Chris Oladokun in the first round of cuts, if you're going to keep those 3 quarterbacks on your active roster, which wasn't necessarily the case if you had Oladokun, you could still release Rudolph and put him on your practice squad, so you have 3 in your meeting room at least during the week. If that's what you're going to do, Rudolph is your number 2 on game days. I don't think that's really even close to a bad move. I think that's what you need to do.
that's a great distinction that you made, because I think when we think about it very quickly, or we just think about it, you're thinking, well, he's the number 2, he's going to dress,
So
and
he
he's
has
going
to.
he has to dress. Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting distinction, because I think you hit the nail on the head. Given Kenny Pickett's level of experience, I think there is a scenario where he doesn't dress. Rudolph would dress if Rudolph is still on the roster,
Yes.
and then they would compete for the position, or who's going to start over the course of the week. That they'll want to get him a full week of practice in with
As
the
the
game
starter.
plan as the starter, to get everyone acclimated to Kenny Pickett being the starter.
So you say
Coaches,
the same thing I
players.
do, in far less words. Good for you for doing that. And that's spot on. And to be honest, it's not rare. The Steelers have done that before. It's a question of between 2 and 3, who's going to start if Roethlisberger goes down for an extended period of time. And if most recently, what we've seen is Mason Rudolph was the guy who came in to replace Ben when he got hurt. And then Rudolph got knocked across the Allegheny, and Duck Hodges then came in. When Rudolph was back healthy, they still competed for that starting job. That wasn't just given to one of them because of a number on a depth chart that, frankly, Mike Tomlin has said repeatedly, the only reason he even fills it out is because he has to. We have no reason to put stock into it. So whatever we want to make out of number 2 versus number 3 means absolutely nothing. It's pointless. What we know is Pickett right now is not likely to fill better the role of the in-game backup quarterback than Rudolph would. And that's not a question of skill or anything like that. It's a question of experience. And the Steelers have gone with that guy every year, basically. Josh Dobbs' biggest value was he saw the field a little bit, but he was very smart, and Ben liked working with him. He liked having him there for observations, to bounce stuff off of, to look at the defense and give his opinions on what's going on. It wasn't that Josh Dobbs is a great quarterback. It's just simply that he knows the game very well, and Ben trusted that. The backup's job is to help prepare the starter and to help the starter execute during games. Rudolph is going to be better at that right now than Kenny Pickett will be, because Pickett doesn't have any NFL experience. It's that simple.
I agree. And since we're talking about Kenny Pickett, and the title of the show is Kenny Pickett the one? And I'm going to toss that question to you, Neil. But before I do, you guys know me. If you guys been listening to me and Neil, this is the no hyperbole zone. We do not get into hyperbole. We try to temper our excitement at the door, and try to give you the God's honest truth. And we try to be very objective. I think one of the great things about the show is Neil does a fantastic job of providing some behind the closed door stuff, particularly about the transactions and the machinations of football and what goes on. And also, Neil brings a fantastic knowledge of the game, the X's and O's aspect of the game in and of itself. But I think the beauty of our show is we don't hold back. We don't pull any punches. We're just going to call it as we see it. I mean, we are 2 Western Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh guys. I mean, I don't think we could do it any other particular way. With all that said, I'm excited about Kenny Pickett. With all that said, I'm excited about Kenny Pickett. Let me just say this. Years ago, when Ben Roethlisberger was a rookie, I think this was the game against the Dallas Cowboys in his first season, when he came back and led the comeback against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, everything that I said, my dad from Woods Run, from Manchester, is 50 times whatever I am in terms of skepticism, no hyperbole zone, so on and so forth. My dad called me and texted me after that comeback and said, "Son, we got our guy. We've got our guy." That's all he said. "I'll talk to you later." And based on that comeback, he hit the nail on the head. I'm going to say this: that throw to Fryermuth, staring the gun down the barrel, great base.
That wasn't even touched.
I mean, the touch, the anticipation, thrown into. I jumped off the couch and said, "I think we got the one. I think we've got the one." Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be a Hall of Famer. That doesn't mean tomorrow he's going to be as good as Ben Roethlisberger. That doesn't mean he's going to be the best quarterback in the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise. What that does mean is he doesn't look like Desmond Ridder. He doesn't look like Malik Willis. He looks like absolutely they got the scout and the evaluation right, that he checks all the boxes to be that guy to move this franchise forward. And the Pickett era is going to start sooner than later. The last thing that I want to see, and maybe we'll see it tomorrow, I want to see him manage a ton of drives. I want to see him play quarter and a half, 2 quarters. But I'm what is it? Bullish? I always get this stuff right. Bullish and bearish.
Bullish.
Is it bullish?
Bullish is aggressive.
Yes, I'm
Bulls
bullish.
attack out,
Yeah.
bears attack down.
See, I'll never forget it now. See. And also Neil's great benefit to the show is he corrects my bad usage of words and cliches. I'm absolutely bullish on Kenny Pickett. Am I overreacting to that throw? Did I see? I mean, did it? I mean, it just gave me warm and fuzzies. I was just like, man, I think we got our guy. I think they have found the next guy. The only thing with Kenny Pickett, but I think physically he's good enough. He's just not a pop off the screen traits guy like a Justin Herbert or a Josh Allen or somebody like that. But as Richard Krikorian said, I'm surprised Lance is on the train so soon. I got a ticket, and it's not in coach. It's first class, baby. What's your thoughts on Kenny Pickett?
I will give you this as all of the expert level master understanding I have of the quarterback position, having been a quarterback in high school. I can tell you this. As a fan, watching it, understanding what Pickett had to do from the time getting the ball to his hand, seeing the unchecked pass rush that was in his grill pretty much immediately, for him to shuffle through. And Fryermuth was, no one's going to tell you this, but you just know when you see it. You look at the field, the way that Pickett reacted to the field, Fryermuth was not the primary option on that play. He checked off of that. He saw where Fryermuth was going to be, not where he was, where he was going to be. Quickly adjusted himself and delivered a perfect strike on a very difficult but very important throw. If anything, it was almost as if Mike Tomlin wanted Pickett to be in that situation with the clock melting down, without even a shred of pass protection, to run that play so he could see where Fryermuth was going to be against that pass rush and be able to hit him on a dime to see if he had pardon the expression, the balls to play in this league. And he did. He hit it dead on. It was perfect. It was an absolutely perfect play. For me, my reaction was similar to yours. I think it went something like, I stood up and, oh, F yeah, Kenny, that's the play. It was perfect. You can't ignore that sort of thing. That's largely what makes the difference between a good NFL quarterback and an average one. Being able to read that play. You know what the little hidden secret is? Ben didn't throw guys open like that. Ben loved to stand tall, fight off, and then go off schedule. They set up one of the first teams to do this. If you want, in coming years, we'll get into the legacy of Ben Roethlisberger. One of those legacies is that team Hines Ward, Randall L., Lee Mays, those guys, they had secondary routes on plays. They were the first team to have scheduled secondary routes. When this one didn't work and you didn't get the ball, if the play is still alive, you then go here. They did it on schedule for Ben to go off schedule because that's the way he wanted to play the game. Pickett is not that kind of athlete. He doesn't have that kind of arm, but he can make something out of the play that he's given. And frankly, if Mitch Trubisky could do that in week 1, they might have a chance. I'm not sure that Mitch Trubisky's all that good at that either. So it's what I see from Pickett, and I've been saying this since he was drafted and before he was drafted, the sum of his whole is greater than the sum of his parts. Okay. He does not have a great arm. He has okay, a little above average mobility. He can move around. His accuracy is all right. It's not great. He doesn't do anything at a high level, except he puts everything together on a play-to-play basis, on a snap-to-snap basis, and he rises above what he has. And he does that consistently. The internet dorks and draft Twitter and all that dog him for his deep ball, and I don't understand why. He throws a deep ball, in my opinion, better than anybody else was in this class, easily compared to this class. And he could be a very effective deep ball thrower. Is it going to go 80 yards? No, he doesn't need it to go 80 yards. I mean, make a 40-yard throw. That's helpful on a football field. 80 might be a little bit here and there, but he can make those kinds of throws. In my opinion, it's because Kenny Pickett is competitive enough. He has that drive about him that he puts everything together for those big plays because that's what he wants. He loves that. He loves playing the game. He loves competing, and guys will run through a wall for him. And I think we saw that. Everyone's saying it up and down. The tenor of the offense completely changed when he got in the game. It's absolutely true. What else do you attribute that to except for, wow, I've got confidence in this guy? If you watch this team play when Trubisky was in, and no disrespect to Trubisky, the offensive line all looked like they were hungover and took dumps in their pants. I mean, it was awful. It's not that they were significantly better when Pickett was in there, but Pickett just made them pay for coming after him. He just has that it factor, and it's fun to watch. None of this means that he's not going to go out and not perform particularly well against Detroit on Sunday afternoon. I don't know. I don't think he's a great quarterback where we sit right now, but there are a lot of things to really like about him. We should be excited about him. If we have to immediately go to the same bullshit that everyone called me out for on here last week, as far as being excited about George Pickens, I'm not putting him in the Hall of Fame. I'm not saying that he's a all-pro quarterback. I'm not saying he's Josh Allen. I'm saying he's a good NFL quarterback. I'm surrounded by Vikings fans who hate Kirk Cousins so much, they want Kellen Mond to play, okay? That's how bad the situation is to Vikings fans. Kirk Cousins is an above-average NFL quarterback. You cannot expect Justin Herbert to be the standard of quarterback play. Those guys are so far above and beyond what's normal. You can't look at that as your indication because you're not going to get that guy at 20 overall. Kenny Pickett has every opportunity to be a good quarterback, and he's shown that in the time that we've seen him up to this point. I'm excited to see what he can do tomorrow. His career is not going to begin or end based on his performance, but what we have seen to this point, we should be encouraged about a guy who is probably going to be starting next season.
When you look at Kenny Pickett, he is the absolute definition of a high floor, low ceiling player.
Probably.
And, that's what he is. And you can win consistently in this league with Kirk Cousins' level of quarterback play. It just means that other areas of your roster have to be rock solid. When you have a Herbert or you have a Mahomes or a Rodgers or a Brady, I'm going to get a cliche wrong. All tides get lifted. Anyway, you guys
high
know
tide
the cliche.
Rises all ships.
High tide rises all ships. That's what elite quarterbacks, tier 1 guys do. When you have a tier 3 guy like a Cousins, you just need a little bit of help, but you have quality quarterback play pretty consistently week in, week out that gives you an opportunity to win. One thing you touched upon, and you talked about the offensive line looking like it was hungover. Houston, I think we have a problem with pass protection. Let me give you some of these PFF grades for the pass protection in the game from the offensive line. Kendrick Green, 31.9. John LeGlue, 36.2. James Daniels, 38.7. Mason Cole,
$7 million this year.
44.4.
$5 million this year.
Dan Moore Jr., 49.9. Now that's overall pass grades. Now, in terms of just true pass sets, James Daniels, 23.4. Mason Cole, 39.2. John LeGlue, 44.3. Dan Moore Jr., 35.8. Houston, we have a problem. As bullish as we are on Kenny Pickett, the beauty of football, it always comes back to the trenches. It always comes back to the trenches, and the foundation of your football team, in my opinion, starts on your offensive line. They set the tenor, they set the tone. That's the foundation of your football team. If you have a weak foundation, you cannot build a house, you cannot have a home. It's going to crumble. When you look at their foundation of their offensive line from a pass protection perspective, it looked absolutely terrible. It was, I don't think I've seen it as bad so soon, so quickly. Dan Moore Jr., that looks like, I don't know if that's going to work. He's so he is so
just not sure about this.
I
don't know.
He is so susceptible to an outside speed rush. This
he's
just
susceptible to everything. There's not like there's one weakness they're exploiting. He's getting just whipped in every area of the game. People keep wanting to come up with all these different technical sounding reasons. The guy is getting his ass kicked. It's that simple. It doesn't matter what they're doing. They're getting through to the quarterback on every snap. If it's not, it needs to be somebody. I know that. I am not somebody that lines one person up at a time to assign blame as if that's our sole purpose for being fans. I'm sure Mike Tomlin noticed the problems that they had, and I'm sure there are several people involved. But what we are talking about is, without hyperbole, some of the worst pass protection I have ever seen at the NFL level. I don't care if it's a Super Bowl or a preseason game. It was awful. Absolutely awful. I'm not going to blame just the player because, frankly, you're at an NFL level. All of those guys have played before. If this is a rookie, all right, it might be a different story. All of them have played before. For you to get beat that badly, that consistently, unless you're going up against Mean Joe, Deacon Jones, roided up and advanced evolutionarily to today's standards, you shouldn't be giving up pressures on 3 of 7 snaps. Okay. That's horrendously bad. The NFL is based on parity. Okay. There should be an equal amount of give and take, not destroying the other guy. Defensive players are going to get sacks. It's a very hard position to play, offensive tackle. You need to be successful at minimum 94% of the time. But when you're successful 45% of the time, you either shouldn't be there, or something that they're telling you to do is grossly not working. And that, we can go through the whole list. Read them off again, Lance. Those are horrendous numbers, by the way. I don't think they give grades lower than like 31. Whatever their scoring system is, I'm not sure. It doesn't go much lower than that. No, I'm just thinking of Animal House. Lukarski, 0.1 GPA. Congratulations, you're the top of the Delta Pledge class. That was Dan Moore in pass protection.
No, they do give grades below 31. James Daniel got a 23.4.
All right, so now they're setting new lows. Okay, that's 2 series worth of play. 2 series. It was horrendous. We don't need to rehash that. I think we've talked about it. I don't know how much. I would expect the offensive line to be standing on its head tomorrow against Detroit, just simply because you could count on one finger the amount of times Mike Tomlin has gone to the press and acknowledged how badly, specifically, he chewed out one group of players on the field in the preseason. He doesn't do that. That's how bad it was. And that's not overreaction. That's not hyperbole. It was that bad. Trust me on this. If they perform anything like that in week one, wow, something really, really got missed. It looked worse than any point last season to me. It was a worse performance than anyone they had last year. And they had 2 rookies starting last year.
Speaking of Tomlin, Tomlin is very good with the quips. And I think the one from this week what was the best I've heard in a while. I don't send messages, I make moves. Speaking of moves, and to Grayson Brown's point, we're not saying that PFF, in terms of its grading and scoring, is the be all to end all. What I do say and why I like PFF is, if you've ever tried to watch film consistently, it's laborious. Now, whether you grade it like I would grade it or think about it like I think about it, I appreciate the labor that they put into it to get all that stuff out and go through all that film. It is a ton of work.
Just to add this to it, I get why people hate PFF. I have a whole thing about that I'm not going to get into. They're better at it than you are. Okay, I'll say that. You might not agree. There's a lot of semantics that are involved with it. A lot of it comes down to definition, because when the rubber meets the road, this is a subjective art. Okay, evaluation is not scientific. It's not black and white. There are a lot of different things that can come into it. They have a reasonable process that does make sense. And I will say this, if we are talking about the Steelers' offensive line against Jacksonville in preseason week 2, if their grades were low, they were right. Okay. The depth of how low it could get, it's beside the point. They were accurate. If they said collectively, all of them sucked in that game, they were right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, yes, it's the level of suckage. I mean, what number do you want to put on it? I mean, but when Mike Tomlin says, I don't send messages, I make moves, I think that sounds good. I mean, that's great. It sounds good. It's a funny quote. Let's peel the onion back a little bit, because it's great to say that, but the bigger issue is, why is the offensive line looking this bad? The second issue is, I don't send messages, I make moves. Well, one of the moves that Mike Tomlin did make was they drafted more.
Made a lot of moves.
They made a lot of moves. They drafted
a lot of moves.
They signed Cole. They signed Daniels.
Maybe
more.
Try sending some messages. I don't know.
Aside from the message of duck, help, run for help, when it comes to the offensive line and the quarterback, help, go get some garlic, a rosary, and some holy water. I mean, besides all of those messages, I mean, we can't let Tomlin off the hook with that, with that funny quote. I mean, it's a great quote. It's great for the open mic segment, but we can't let Tomlin off the hook. I mean, you went out there and you signed Daniels and you signed Cole and you drafted more. What is going on with the evaluation of the offensive line? Now, the Steelers do a fantastic job. Now, they do a fantastic job at the wide receiver position. We see it over and over and over again. We see certain teams, they identify certain players better in certain positions better than others. What do you attribute the inconsistency of this offensive line play, and what do you attribute to, them going out and getting a Daniels and getting a Cole, and the returns look like this? Not to say that those guys can't improve, because, man, just having a pulse would be an improvement.
Improving should not be a challenge at all.
I mean, it should not be a challenge. I mean, what do you attribute to these moves? I don't send messages, I make moves, and all of these moves not hitting the mark. I mean, what are you attributing to their inconsistent play so far? Is it coaching? Is it technique? Is it the guys just aren't that good? What do you think the Steelers saw when they we're thinking about signing these players in free agency, just look into your Neil Straball, your crystal ball, and just give me your thoughts on it.
If we're two different segments of this, and I want to hit on what Monsoon posted here, because that's absolutely the top of it, but that's not what you just asked, Lance. If we're digging into the personnel, you have to consider the possibility that these guys were mid-round picks. Okay. Dan Moore Jr. was a 4th-round draft pick who played fairly well in a zone-based offense, and he hasn't really done that to this point. They're asking him to do different things. Kendrick Green was a guy that played guard, switched to center, played center in the NFL, was switched back to guard, and no one's really sure if he was ever good at either one of them. And to this point now, I would have told you 6 months ago, there's no way Kendrick Green could be worse at guard as he is at center, and somehow he is. Dan Moore, not good. James Daniels, free agent. Bears fans were not sad to see him go. Bears fans sold you up and down, not worth the money that the Pittsburgh just spent. I disagreed with that. I've watched James Daniels for 2 preseason games, and I think he should be working at the snack bar. I think it's been that bad to this point. It doesn't add up. There are misses on guys, and there are colossal mistakes. If James Daniels alone is responsible for the level of play that he's been at this point, that's one thing. What I would ask is, considering you've gone from Mike Munchak to Sean Sarrett to Adrian Clem and now to Pat Meyer, you've had 4 offensive line coaches in the last 4 years. This is your 4th. The 3 prior to that, 1 left, 2 got fired, essentially. All right. Okay. 2 left for reasons that weren't their own. Well, Sarrett, I think, got fired. Clem left, but Clem was absolutely going to get fired. The lack of continuity above everything else, I think, is the problem here. And it's a problem we knew they were going to have again, because just like last year, while they don't have rookies this time, they do have a bunch of new players in new positions. It's hard to overcome that. Let's go back just a couple of years when the Steelers' offensive line was really good. They committed a bunch of money and 1st-round picks to Maurkice Pouncey and David DeCastro. They got Alejandro Villanueva on a pretty affordable extension for a left tackle. Ramon Foster was on like his 4th contract with the team and started for 7-8 straight years, something like that. And Marcus Gilbert, to some degree, was your right tackle, replaced by Matt Filer, who did pretty well and had been with the team for 3 years prior to that. They had a trove of players who were coming up that they had developed, that had worked in the same system with the same coach, the same offensive coordinator, and the same quarterback. Continuity matters among your offensive line. And they have the exact opposite of that now. And they have the exact opposite of last year. And they're still the opposite of what they were last year. So they're starting over yet again. I don't think it's purely a personnel issue, but I also don't think that I said this repeatedly over the year. Just because you go sign new offensive linemen does not give you a better offensive line. Absolutely. It gives you a higher ceiling. You can grow into it. Not going to happen right away. I forget who it was, or the what reporter, I won't mention his name, from The Athletic, got roasted for suggesting this earlier this week. This offense is going to struggle early in this season. It could be 3-4 games. It's going to really struggle because there are a ton of new pieces that they have to work in. This is not Madden, okay? You can't just plug guys in and expect great things to happen. They have to build themselves. That's going to take a while, all right? They might make a couple plays. Everyone betting on how great Najee Harris is. You're right. He's not going to have any room to run the ball anywhere because they don't have an offensive line that's played together. So it takes time to develop that. We're going to rip it. Okay. Well, trust me, we'll be at the front lines. We'll gnash our teeth and wring our hands along with you guys, but that doesn't fix anything. They've got things they need to fix. There are personnel issues. There are schematic issues. All these things have to come together, and they need to get in the lab and figure it out. Okay. That's their job. They're professionals. They're being paid to do that. They'll figure it out to the best ability that they can. Last season, they ironed out a lot of the problems that they had. I think they have a higher ceiling this year than they did. They can grow better than they were last year, and they might be able to get that process going a little bit earlier in the season. But rest assured, they're not going to be good right away. They're going to be a problem, and there's no way Mike Tomlin is not expecting that.
According to my grades on TNSFF, and I need you guys to subscribe to TNSFF
$89 a
immediately.
month.
We're selling subscriptions of $199 a month. We'll give it to you for a discount, about the same price as the Athletic. Every time the Athletic drops their price, I'm mad because I paid the original
Yeah,
price
exactly.
for the Athletic. I'm just really
Pisses
upset
everybody
about
else
that.
off so they don't
Um,
re-subscribe.
in
Welcome to the
terms of my
subscription business.
Yes. In terms of my TNSFF grade, I have a stack called T-Rex arms. And, when you count T-Rex arms, when your T-Rex arms, your arms are close to your body when you have a 33, 34-inch length and you're trying to block someone, that's not very good. It feels like to me that they're stuck. Like, I'm glad you brought it up. It feels like they're thinking and they're stuck between some approaches. Now, we both know Kendrick Green is not very good. That he's not a good football
It
player.
really is just that simple,
And,
isn't it?
it's just, but he got beat on an inside swim move literally at the snap. And I mean, I've never seen it. It was just open the gates, swim move. I mean, me and my dad watched the play several times. We didn't just watch him getting beat on the swim move. We were looking at the steps that the defender did not stop. He did not stop. So out of his stance, there was no hesitation. It was apply the move, by him, go. It was like almost like he was running unblocked. It was, I
It's
mean,
like a drill.
exactly. It looked like a drill. It looked like he was
Warm up
doing the
snap.
practice swim move on the blocking sled. Um,
I've
o-
I've heard, and I don't know how valid this is, just because the source itself I wouldn't suggest is an expert of offensive terminology or strategy, but I've heard what Meyer is teaching them is kind of a catch blocking technique, which is to say, in pass protection, you're usually dropping back to kind of get balanced and ready to deal with the move as the defender's making it. What they're doing instead is moving into them and like catching them. So you kind of try to cut off their initial move. So if it is that swim move and Green recognizes it, you get into him as he's doing it. He's not going to have the full range of motion of that move. And you can tie him up that way. And then you have the ability and the energy to counter and move him where you need him to go. I don't know if that's true or not. I would say this, though, as far as Kendrick Green is concerned, it looks like that's what he's trying to do, perhaps. And he's just not knowing when to do it. He doesn't have the timing to do it, and he's missing. That's why it looks like he's not moving at all when they come up to him. Like he's not even aware that they're there. Technique could be a part of this. That could be something that gets fixed as you go. Let's not necessarily suggest that they're dead in the water now. And to be fair, I know everybody hates this, and I'm always the person that's going to point it out, but Jacksonville's got some dudes on that defensive line. Okay, that the number one overall, that Walker kid's a beast. All right, he gave poor Dan Moore all he could handle in that outing.
And then some.
Arden Key is a damn good player. They had some highlights, boy. I mean, I'm not saying the Steelers did a whole lot to prevent that, but those dudes were getting after it, and they're aggressive. Bet on Jacksonville. Take the over on Jacksonville this year. I'm telling you now, they're going to win. Doug Peterson's a great coach.
Very rarely in the NFL do you get tape or film where both sides, for opposite reasons, take it with a grain of salt. The Steelers were blocking so poorly that when you look at the film from the Jacksonville perspective, you can just say, well, I know we're not that good. I think they were struggling. From the Steelers standpoint, you can look at it and say,
doesn't matter what they did. We're terrible.
I know we're not bad. We're struggling with this technique. We had a bad day. So it's really weird that you get probably the same evaluation from different ends of the spectrum. It's really weird, but that leads us into a question. That's another point. And I think I know where you stand on this one. There's no way in the world, regardless of if Kenny Pickett is the next one, there's no way in the world that Kenny Pickett could start game one with this offensive line the way it's playing.
I don't think that's not your reason why, but you got to start somebody. Kenny Pickett is paid to play football just the same as Mitch Trubisky is. Why you're okay with throwing the $7.5 million quarterback out there behind this offensive line? You shouldn't be happy right now with the
with
offensive
either.
line, period. I mean, that's just acceptable fact. Somebody has to start. I don't, you're not Kenny Pickett isn't the number one overall pick nursing an injury right now. All right. He's a competitor. He's paid to be out there. If you need him to be out there, get him out there. The reason is he doesn't know enough yet. He's not going to be advanced enough yet that the offense can be fully run through him. There are things that he's good at. There are things that he can do, but your playbook is going to be less deep with a young quarterback. And the shallower you are, the quicker they're going to figure out what you're doing. And they're going to be a step ahead of you in a week or two, and they're going to crush you. Long term, it's not a good idea until he has the full playbook.
That's a great point. And that's a great point the way you framed it. I think when I'm looking at it now as you say it, you can't start Kenny Pickett game one, not necessarily due to the inconsistency of the offensive line, which would absolutely play into it, but it's his level of experience isn't such that he can mitigate some of the issues of the offensive line.
And that's not even a bad thing. It's just that's what it is. Trevor Lawrence had the same problem last year. And Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback prospect I've ever seen. He was taken number 1 overall. He was bad last year. He made a lot of mistakes and things that he's not used to yet. You're going to grow into it. But if you don't need to be out there, and this is why they signed Pickett or Trubisky to begin with, if you don't need him to be out there, he doesn't need to be out there. Let him learn. Let him figure out what's going on. He's not that good. I mean, come on, let's just dial it back for a minute. A veteran is probably right to be starting right now.
I don't want to dial it back. I want to dial it up. This is the first time.
I want a lot of guys to dial it up.
I want to dial it up. I don't want to dial it back. I feel good in this moment of hyperbole. Yeah, I feel good here.
Since we're fired up, let me address another comment here. I want to talk about the stunts that Jacksonville threw out. Jacksonville ran a lot of stunts. Impressive. They're good at that. They did a great job with it. There was one that I watched back, and to be honest with you, I don't remember if it was a hit, a sack, or both. It probably ended in something like that. But they ran a TE stunt, which is a tackle end stunt, which means your interior defensive lineman and your defensive end cross over each other. So usually your defensive tackle shoots out down into the offensive tackle, and the defensive end waits a beat and then curls around him and goes inside of him into the B gap. On this particular play, the Jaguars ran that. I forget who the two players were. I think Key was the tackle, though. He ran and hit Moore, and I don't think it was Walker. Maybe it was Walker. Walker comes around him and hits Green inside of him. And you freeze it at that spot, and both Moore and Green are in good position to handle what it is. 2 frames later, both defensive players blew the offensive players away. We're on top of the quarterback like 5 frames later. It was like, you had it. What happened? You're not play through the whistle. It was like they just stopped. They got there. They were right where they were supposed to be. They saw the stunt happen in front of them, and then all of a sudden, whoops, there they go. It was just a mess. Jacksonville's going to be good. All right. I'm just saying that now. They're going to be a competitive team this year.
Yeah. I mean, Grayson is bringing up some great points. Grayson said, I feel too good. I feel good too, Lance, but I'm about the delayed gratification. I'm just trying to come out of my shell. I'm just trying to be just extremely optimistic and be in the world of Twitter where everybody is a great player based on very limited sample size. I
can't believe that the level of optimism, though, for this team is just, it's amazing to me. And you heard it last year, Lance. I felt like I was on an island saying they were a 7-win team.
We were,
and I'm wrong because they pull out miracle after miracle and somehow manage to win 9 games and not lose 10 of them and go to the playoffs. They get destroyed by the best teams that they play. But this year, it's like they're possibly worse. You guys are.
It's
people tell me 11 wins. It's like 11 wins. Your offensive line gave up 50% pressure on pass downs in 2 preseason games. 11 wins. They're just going to overcome that, huh? Okay.
And I'm looking at some of the comments from my brother-in-law, Cosmos coach. They don't need to blitz the Steelers currently. There's no reason to. You can get
Yeah,
sufficient
Dak got
pressure
plenty of pressure with 4 guys.
with 4. You might
The
get
5
pressure with
blocking
3.
had no idea where they were.
Yeah.
A 5th might have made it more confusing for the defense.
I mean, it felt like old school Pac-Man when you used to have ghost Pac-Mans. When Pac-Man used to just run through the ghosts and they weren't there. The last point of the show that I wanted to jump into, because you talked a lot. We talked a lot about Pickett. We've talked about Leal. We've talked about Pickens.
There's something to be optimistic about.
In terms of that, and I'm glad you used that word optimism. Pickett, Pickens, Leal, Calvin Austin, Connor Haywood, Mark Robinson. And of course, the quarterback Oladokin has been cut. But
yeah, fuck him.
Is this rookie class going to be special? This rookie class, especially if Kenny Pickett becomes a high floor player, it looks like this class could be really special. Like we've seen flashes from all these guys. We've seen Hayward catch the ball, show great feet. Only guy that we have not seen, we saw Mark Robinson just absolutely try to destroy everything moving. We have not seen Austin yet, but Leal, Pickens, Pickett, all of those guys have played well. I mean, is Kevin Colbert, we'll give Colbert a little bit of grace on these free agent signings of these offensive linemen because we'll wait and see.
Big money guys, not so sure about. We're waiting and seeing on the big money guys. We're overexcited about our 6th and 7th round draft pick.
But looking at this,
a good place to be.
But looking at this class,
hell yeah.
I mean, very rarely do you see a class of 5 or 6 guys where you're like, these dudes look like they can all play. And now that I'm in this hyperbole, I'm feeling great world because, of course, I'm celebrating my anniversary this weekend. That's probably why I feel so happy.
Is she nearby?
No.
Is she in earshot? You sure? No, I'm not believing that.
So
she's close.
So
hey, mine doesn't watch. I can say whatever I want. I think.
So with that being said, if the Steelers are very good, fast forward 2027, I think we're going to point to this class, particularly because of Pickett.
Yes.
So
hopefully, if we are really ecstatic about it, it's going to be because of Pickett. You can't avoid that. You can't bust on the quarterback in the first round and have a good draft class. Because
when you look at Tomlin, I don't know if it's mentioned enough, was the foundation of that team. He had a great foundation to start with from Cowher's guys. But that first draft, laid the foundation when he got Woodley and Timmons. That draft, he hit on like 5 dudes in the draft. Sepulveda.
Ike in that draft too, or is he the next year?
He got Sepulveda in that draft. He got
Robo Punter,
Willie Gray. He got that was a really good draft. What's your thoughts on this draft? I mean, do you think this draft is showing really good traits? Does it have kind of could it be special?
Could be, yeah, sure. I mean, there are probably 28 teams that have rookie classes that could be special. Here's the thing, though. You take a quarterback with the first pick. That defines your draft. That's going to be everything, unfortunately. I don't think that's fair, but at the same time, that's just kind of, life in the big city. You have to look at that. We should be excited over what we've seen from Kenny Pickett to this point. A wide receiver with, in my opinion, top 15 talent falling into the 50s and showing that he's that guy right away. He's going to be your headliner. All due respect to Kenny Pickett, he ain't at that level. He's not the level of Pickens, my opinion. I really, really like what I've seen from DeMarvin Leal. And I know this team can develop defensive linemen. And this kid's going to be good. He's a special player. You can see it already. For as big as he is, as quick as he is, he's going to be a force. I really like what they've got with him. And my favorite guy in the draft, next to Pickens, who didn't even seem real to me when they drafted him, was Calvin Austin. Calvin Austin got a bum rap by all draft critics, talking about him being a slot guy. He played on the outside almost exclusively in college. The kid's a playmaker. You can move him inside, but more than anything, he's quick enough and he's fast enough to go outside and drag across the middle and make plays after catching the ball. We haven't got a chance to see a whole lot of him, and I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen. They're not going to cut him, but they might take him and put him on IR because he hasn't played in an effort to try to keep somebody else after they clear waivers. Something like that could happen with him. But long play with him. I think he's going to be an excellent player in the NFL. He's just way too quick not to be. Much better than where he went to college. From there, Connor Hayward's impressed the hell out of me as a tight end. I've got a lot of people that are probably waiting for him to make the team, along with TJ Watt, or God, it's like the 8th name I've butchered today, along with Derek Watt, fullback and tight end, because they were serious. They were going to move Connor Hayward to tight end. I didn't think there was a way he was going to do that. He impresses the hell out of me. He's a good player all around as a tight end. You have to be very impressed with that. But when you get Mark Robinson, an FCS running back who's barely played defense, and he, frankly, has looked better than Devin Bush has through the preseason. He knows what he's doing. He doesn't mess around. I avoided the profanity this time, Lance. I know you appreciate that. The dude just gets after it. He's straight to the ball. He doesn't waste movement. If you want to evaluate linebackers, especially inside linebackers, watch their movements immediately after the snap. That will tell you right away how good he is. Okay? If he shuffles his feet, if he dances around a bit, he doesn't know where the ball is going, and he's not a great instinctive player. He's not going to do much at the NFL. Mark Robinson has no reason to know where the ball is going, except for the fact that he's just locked into what he's doing. He knows the game. You can tell. And he shouldn't. There's no reason that he shouldn't. My opinion, he's the guy more than anybody else in this team. Probably should have been drafted a lot higher than he was. And something happened there. Probably his level of play in concert with the fact that he didn't play linebacker before. I think he's going to be the guy probably the most fun to watch over the next year or two. I really think he makes the team. And that, to me, more than anything, that suggests the problems that they have at inside linebacker right now. But I really like his future. To go into this detail for every single player who's there, to me, that's the makings of a special class. I don't think we've seen one like this since like 2002. You remember that team? That draft? That was Kendall Simmons, Randall L., Larry Foote, Chris Hope. Who else was I? Lee Mays, was he a part of that? It was a very, very solid championship foundational building draft. Not superstars, but all of them were players, and all of them were the right guys to fill the right spots that team would need in 2-3 years. I think that's what they have with this class.
Yeah, I think it's a very special class. I think the potential is there. For me, a lot of times it's trusting my feelings about something. And when you come from a place of you allow yourself to be convinced, it's odd when your antenna goes up and you go, these guys look good. It's like, so I've watched all these guys and I'm looking at Pops and we're going, gee, they might have hit on all these dudes. Like it just feels different than your normal class where you get one or two guys that are halfway decent. Looking at this class, you're just like, I think Colbert went out with a bang here. Before we get out of here, and we are going to try to hit it exactly on the hour. And that 2002 class was Simmons, Randall L., Chris Hope, Larry Foote, Veron Hayes, Lee Mays, LeVar Glover, and Brett Keisel.
Veron Hayes and Keisel. Forgot about Keisel.
That was a great draft there. What are you looking for in this last game? You put anything into Trubisky starting the last game? I figure they just want to get him to get some more reps. I think I
think it's 3 games, instead of 4. Yeah. I think if they had already played 3 games, it probably wouldn't. But they cut Oladokin for a reason. May as well get him out there. I mean, he's new to the team. He's not Ben. He's new to the team. He's new to the offense. They all need work. And I think that's really what Tomlin is saying above anything else is the offense, first unit offense, you need work. You're playing. You're going to get out there. Rudolph probably plays the whole second half, but I think he would want to get the starters a series, maybe 2, but that's it.
Yeah, I mean, clearly that offensive line needs to play. It needs to play. They need to put some good film together.
They're not good enough to not play right now.
Particularly in pass protection. But with that, we're going to go ahead and conclude the show. I want to thank everybody for hopping on to the New Standard Experience. And with it, as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe.